You're listening to Coast Business Radio with Mike Ryan.
Matt Canavan was elected to the Senate in 2013, served as the Minister for Northern Australia and as the Minister for Resources until 2020. Matt is currently the Deputy Leader of the Nationals in the Senate and enjoying time at home, I think. Matt, is that right?
Well, good to be here, Mike. Yes, it's been a very surreal month, I suppose, for most Australians. Normally in this role as a senator, you're lucky to spend 4 or 5 nights at home a month, whereas I've been home every night for the last month. And while this is a terrible, terrible thing, being able to spend more time with my kids and my wife has been a really nice thing. So we just got to make the most of this terrible outcome.
Sit in the backyard, get a bit of a tan, think about the cricket coming up. No footy to watch, not much else to do.
It's a bit of a hole in your life not having the. I was just thinking last night, normally there'd be a Thursday night game. That would have been nice to sit down and watch. But look, that's the least of our worries. One thing that we've got into that Chris Hemsworth app, and my wife and I do those every day on our back deck. That sort of high intensity training. So actually feeling like getting fitter, surprisingly. But again, not having to travel so much. That's not great for your health, obviously, and it's my normal life. Will be again sometime soon, I'm sure.
So is the fitness part or the six-pack part of just when you get back to the Senate, they're going to have this newfound respect for you?
Well, I am turning 40 later this year, so I set myself a goal that if I don't get a six-pack this year, it'll never happen. But I'm not there yet, mate. So, but yeah, look, it's important to stay fit and healthy, particularly at times like this. So. That's the one thing we can all do is exercise, and when we do go for a bike ride and that, there's a lot of people out from around our suburb, and there's a nice community feel here too, so we're all just supporting each other and getting through this.
Look, you're very passionate about the resource industry and the farmer on the land. You said that you're committed to making sure we can use our stuff, use our coal, use our water, use our great agricultural resources to grow and develop a better nation. And we're not being able to do that right now. Now, take out the coronavirus emergency. What's needed?
Well, the fundamental thing that is needed, I believe, is to allow farmers, allow communities to have much more control over how things happen in their local area. We have a system, or we've evolved into a system where if you want to cut down a tree somewhere, if you want to start a mine, you've got to go thousands of kilometres away, often to Canberra, sometimes Brisbane, to seek their permission and approval first. And the people you have to deal with, you're lucky if any of them have spent any time on the land or in a mine. Most of them have spent their lives as public servants, often committed public servants. I'm not saying there's any maliciousness about this, but they don't have the understanding of what happens locally on the ground, and that often, in the best circumstances, just holds things up, which can be death anyway. Delay can be death for some of these types of projects. And the worst situation is that there's just a complete lack of understanding, and things get stopped completely. And that's led to an outcome where we've missed a lot of opportunities in our country over the last decade, in my view. Not being able to use our stuff has meant that we have not taken opportunities to build dams and grow farming districts. Some mining opportunities have passed us by. And perhaps most importantly, particularly post this coronavirus, is it's weakened our energy system. We've got high energy, or have high energy prices. And over the last decade, it's the first decade on record that our manufacturing industry has actually shrunk. It's been declining as a share of our economy for some time, but we've always actually continued to grow the manufacturing industry in absolute terms until the last decade. And that's something I think it's got to change. We've, after this, got to become much more focused on our manufacturing sector and producing stuff that we need.
It's interesting, and I agree totally with what you're saying, but when there's a crisis, we must do that, and once it goes, it's amazing how fast we can forget. So what do you have to do then to make sure that we don't forget?
Yeah, look, it's just about keeping the pressure up on these types of issues. I do think at the end of the health crisis here, and there will be an end to this, At the end of that, there will be a great focus on what we can do to rekindle, restart our economy. We don't know yet how many, but thousands of Australians have lost their jobs. Predictions are that unemployment will probably go into the double digits, and we're going to need a laser-like focus on putting people back to work, creating jobs again. Perhaps something we haven't quite had the focus on in the last few years. We've had 30 years without a recession. My generation does not know. We've never been in the labour force during a recession. That'll probably change, because we're probably going to go into a formal recession this year, and that's I think going to lead to a huge mind shift on how we approach issues like development, like building dams, like supporting the mining industry, and, as I say, specifically in response to coronavirus, like making things. I mean, we've struggled to be able to make masks and ventilators. We're making some progress, but we don't have a manufacturing industry as strong as it was 20 or 30 years ago, and that does make us weaker in responding to crises like this.
It's interesting, that even on the Gold Coast, there's some distilleries that are making antiseptic hand wash and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's actually, really good as a stopgap measure, but they were never set up to make sanitizers, and they were set up to make gin and the other delicious stuff. But so even though they're plugging the hole just a little bit, I don't see that being enough to get them through. How do you see that?
Well, look, it's going to evolve. I can't predict exactly what will happen, but as I say, I do think there'll be a great focus on what we can do to support our manufacturing sector going forward. I think all options have to be put on the table here, and we used to protect our manufacturing industry from overseas competition. I think that's something we've got to look at, particularly competition from the likes of China, which have repeatedly flouted WTO requirements on supporting and over assisting their local manufacturing sector. So they regularly put preference in favour of Chinese manufactured goods, and potentially lead to the dumping of those elsewhere in the world. And we've got to make sure that our manufacturing sector isn't exposed to that. The other thing we've got to do is what I mentioned earlier, is we've got to get energy prices down. We can't have electricity prices triple what they are in the US, double what they are in Canada, and expect our manufacturing industry to be able to compete on a world stage. Now, we've done that to our energy sector through mad renewable energy policies that have been focused on the wrong objective. The focus has been on how you produce power, what type of power you produce, not the cheapest type of power, and that's what we've got to get back to get those prices down for people, particularly those businesses that rely on energy. We're not going to become a manufacturing powerhouse by lowering wages, right? That's not what we won't. We're a high wage economy. But so is the US, so is Canada, so is Germany. They're all strong manufacturing countries because they have low energy prices, or have had. Germany's doing their best to change that. But we need to get back to that, because if you've got cheap energy, you can have high wages. You can't have both. If you have dear energy, you'll have to have lower wages, and that's not what I think the Australian people want.
Do you think just speaking of energy, do you think the reason why in the US it's way under half of what we pay here, do you think that's because Donald Trump doesn't like windmills?
I mean, I certainly think the policies of the Trump administration have helped, and I'll come to that. But the reason the US has low energy prices is because of a longer process that predates Trump, and that they're allowed to use their stuff. It comes back to what I was saying. They've been permitted in the US to drill for oil and gas, and they've been remarkably successful at finding cheap forms of gas, and that has led to a huge reduction in US energy prices. Although even before that, even before the shale revolution, they still had low energy prices because they were able to use their coal, and we're not allowed to use our coal to produce cheap energy and create jobs, at least not by this Queensland government we've got at the moment. And likewise, we've had various restrictions on gas production and gas exploration around Australia, and that has limited our ability to follow the US down this lower energy price curve. So that's our problem now. our best hope at the moment is that we can start to equalise a little bit by importing gas, which is ridiculous given how much gas we have here in Australia. But unless we're allowed to produce it, well, of course, we're going to have to import it. And then we'll only be paying export parity prices, not have an advantage.
With the coronavirus, there's incredible debt, public and private, decimation of small business and the self-employed. Unemployment is growing 10% plus, and that's probably been kept down to that level because of JobKeeper. You think, I mean, and some economists and some people are thinking along the lines that all that will remain after we come out of this, the bigger business will become bigger and the government will become even bigger.
Well, I think that's a choice. I think that will the path we take is a choice we have before us. Obviously, on a statistical level, we'll have a larger government sector coming immediately out of this because of the various assistance measures that we are providing, including, as you mentioned, the JobKeeper program. Now, all of those things, in my view, have been necessary for the crisis, but they will have to be ended. We cannot continue to subsidise wages in the way we are through JobKeeper over the long term. So I have to pull back on that. And the other thing we've got to pull back on then is to get the economy going is regulation. So that's a choice. Now, if we can see perhaps, the crises do clarify your thoughts about what's important. And that happens at the household level or the nation level when you have a shock to your income. And my wife and I have had that at times. We've had a shock to our budget. You have to go through and look at, well, what's really important and what's not. Do you really need the Foxtel subscription? Do you need to buy the new car this year? And you go through and cut back what's the most essential. And that will be the choice that faces us after this. Will we seek to cut back on some of the unnecessary regulation? And you can see we've done that already. I mean, look, at the start of this crisis, I dealt with somebody who was looking for approval to start manufacture of some potential therapeutic drugs. And they were being told by the TGA, the regulator of drugs in Australia, it would take 40 days for approval. In the middle, this crisis was evolving on a day-to-day basis. And Greg Hunt, to his credit, the health minister, did a great job of cutting through all that, and they got approval within 24 hours. Now, if we can do that now and get regulation moving a lot quicker and unlocking business, we need to do that in other sectors of the economy as well. And I suppose how I've been characterising it is that unfortunately our economy has gone into hibernation in the last month and is probably going to stay in that state for some months yet. What we need to start thinking about to de-hibernate the economy is how do we hibernate the regulators, put some of them into hibernation so that we can unlock the potential that we have in our small businesses, in our entrepreneurs, and get the economy going.
Let's talk about infrastructure spending again, which makes government bigger. But are there any new sizable projects that you can see starting in Queensland, say in the next 12, 18 months?
Yeah, look, there is the potential. The big ones that we've been working on for some time that are sitting there waiting to go are dams. When we came to government in 2013, we kind of changed the narrative on dams. We've gone through a generation where dams haven't been built in Australia, and Tony Abbott had a big policy, a big push to rekindle dam building. Now, we've done some things, but it takes a long time to turn governments around, particularly when you have to deal with state governments as well. And, when we came to government, there weren't a lot of plans for dams because we haven't been doing them for a generation. There's no designs. There were sort of ideas, but the plans we did have were 20 years old, gathering cobwebs on shelves of long neglected Department of State developments. And we got all those up, and now we have some projects that could start, in that time frame, the next 12 to 18 months. So there's the Lakelands Dam up near a place called Laura, north of Cairns. A great project, tens of thousands of hectares could be developed there. There's the Hells Gate Dam, which would be bigger than the Burdekin Falls Dam, just west of Townsville, and it would open up potentially up to over 50,000 hectares. It'd be another Burdekin, basically, if it was built. And then there's the Urana Dam in the lower Burdekin, a bit closer to Mackay, that could help support the coal industry, potentially help support a coal-fired power station, which is another project that could be built in that time frame or start to be built in that time frame, and also help expand agriculture through the Collinsville-Bowen region as well. So there's a lot of projects there in Queensland that are now on the books in that water power sort of space, but They will need government support. They will need a level of government investment, as all of these types of projects have required in the past. They will create jobs, and more importantly, they'll create wealth for the long term for our country.
So the Bradfield scheme, maybe, or a different version of that?
So the Bradfield scheme, in its full design, it's not really in a state to start in that next 12 to 18 months. But the Hells Gate Dam is part of the Bradfield scheme. It was always part of the inception of there being that build big dam. And my view is the Bradfield scheme is, if we can move it forward, is going to be like an elephant. You're going to have to eat it one piece at a time. You're not going to be able to build a 2,000 kilometre canal or pipeline from North Queensland to South Queensland straight away. But you can do bits and pieces over time. So building the dams a start. I think the next step after that would be linking up the Burdekin River with the Gulf rivers, particularly the Flinders River. It's pretty close to the Burdekin at the upper Flinders. And there's that. This is something, I'm very passionate about. Not many, I suppose, have even been there, but that Gulf River system, the Flinders and the Gilbert rivers, are just amazing rivers. Huge amounts of water flow out to the Gulf of Carpentaria. We only use about 2 to 3% of it, but we don't even really know because we don't measure it even properly. The country in that area is perfect for irrigation and farming. It's flat, often downs country, so there's not a lot of trees to clear. It's great soils, as good soils as you get around Gundawindi, so you could grow cotton, fodder crops in some areas, some of the more northern areas, sugar as well. And so it's got huge potential to grow agriculture in a totally frontier part of our state. So that's what excites me. I mean, there's development you can do on the Gold Coast, there's development you can do in Brisbane, and that's great, and those areas will continue to grow. But going to a completely frontier pioneering area of our country, like a place like Normanton, a few hundred people, a lot of economic disadvantage, particularly among Indigenous people. Why I'm in politics is I'd love to try and kickstart something, do something which starts a process. We get more water, get more agricultural development, and then in a generation, and it takes a generation, you look back and there's a town of a few thousand people, and there's economic opportunity there. So that would be great. The one restriction there is you could start that now. You don't need the Hells Gate to start doing it. It would help to start that Bradfield scheme too. But the Queensland government, over their time in government, has only issued a few thousand megalitres of water on that river system, despite the CSIRO saying that it's environmentally responsible to do it. You could issue hundreds of thousands of megalitres, which is what you need to get a cotton gin or a sugar mill up. You could do that. But for whatever reason, this government has been dragging their heels. They haven't issued that water. And if you don't have the water, you don't have the farming. If you don't have the farming, you don't have the jobs. Build
the dams. Anyway, Victoria, by the way, said, same question, are you going to build some new dams? And somebody from the government said, there won't be enough rain over the next 50 years. So anyway, that's another comment.
And it's rained the last few months.
That's right, the great floods.
The
great floods.
Forever, and anyway.
What goes round comes round. Look, Matt, great chatting to you. Just finally, as you're now a TV critic, what's worth seeing on TV at the moment besides maybe the Bolt Report or Alan Jones?
Well, look, it kind of depends, I suppose, if I'm watching with my wife or I'm watching on my own. I love these behind-the-scenes sport things. So that The Test is it on Prime, on Amazon Prime, which gives a behind-the-scenes look at the Australian cricket team post the sandpaper incident. That's fantastic. You get to go into the dressing room. So if you love sport, it's sort of a fix at the moment. There's not a lot of live sport on. I'm actually watching it again. It was so good. With my wife, we're watching another sport thing actually called The English Game on Netflix. It's okay. I don't think it's fantastic, but yeah, I'll see if I get through all that. So anyway, and then with the kids, obviously, you're watching lots of different things. I watched 2001 Space Odyssey with my son the other night. That was pretty weird.
It is.
I hadn't seen it before. I did say to him at the end, he's 15. He's a bit older. And I said to him at the end, well, that was the best kids don't do drugs message I could have ever come up with, better than what I could have said to you. So the 60s was a very weird decade, wasn't it? So
it was. And some are still living it.
That's right. I've never stopped.
Look, Matt, great chatting. Do this again. Thank you very much. Just finally, do you have shares in Sky? I mean, every time I turn Sky on, there you are.
No, I don't. I have said to him I wouldn't mind getting an office there at some point. Make it a little bit easier. Like, you don't need that right now.
No.
So, yeah, no worries.